Hey everyone, Mark Johnston here with the High Thrive Live weekly live stream. So recently we put out a poll just asking people the focus, what people are looking for as far as a focus and what they'd like to see from material and us next. And I think overwhelmingly the response was involved, people were telling us that they wanted to know how to rebuild trust in the relationship. And I think that's so great. It's such a great topic, such a rich topic to talk about. I mean, especially in any relationship, whether it is a marriage that is going really strong, it's really thriving, or whether it is one that is struggling to find its stability. Trust is absolutely important. So, along with that poll, I was giving this a lot of thought, and I wanted to really, give out some good advice as some basic things on how to rebuild trust. And kind of, as I did research and as I was looking into things, I kind of came across some ideas that I think are really going to be helpful here. So what I have is 3 gifts, 3 things that can be focused on in order to really improve trust and intimacy in a relationship. And if you can give your husband or wife or significant other these things, you're way far, you're going to hit the ground running as far as rebuilding trust. So what I'm talking about here, just to paint the picture, a lot of times what trust is about, what I'm talking about is a measure of how intimate or how close you feel with someone else. We can have trust or intimacy in many different areas, whether that is trust and intimacy, say sexually or physically, whether that is emotionally, whether that is intellectually. And I tend to see that these things tend to be compartmentalized in many relationships. But in any single area, if you can give these 3 gifts, give your relationship these 3 foci, different focuses, you'll really make some strides in rebuilding or even just building up trust and intimacy. And so number 1 is the gift of acceptance. If trust and intimacy are so closely tied together, what we can also surmise is that trust is also one of the ways that you build it up is by being vulnerable, by putting yourself out there, by opening up, and by it being treated well. What I mean by that is by, as one person opens up, if the other person accepts that vulnerability. Specifically, what I mean is, a lot of times when in a discussion like this, when one person or the other brings up a problem or a concern, a complaint, what is the general response? Typically, most people, they respond to that with defensiveness. They respond to it, by putting out a complaint themselves. For example, there might be an instance where a wife goes to her husband and says, you know what, I don't think you've been helping out enough around the house. I'm really stressed. And the husband, in this sort of example, would respond, okay, well, I'm not helping out around the house because, well, you don't do this or that, or I'm just feeling stressed, whatever. And that statement by the initial statement by the wife just wasn't accepted. Instead, it was deflected, or it was countered, or there's defensiveness involved. And that erodes trust. And so what you can do is give this gift of acceptance. Specifically, when you're accepting, you're leaving out any amount of judgment, blame, or criticism. You're leaving out acceptance. You're mostly receiving, and you're trying to understand. And if you can do that consistently, that trust will be built up. As someone brings out a concern, and that concern is then accepted and listened to and understood, it is much more likely for that same individual to continue to want to talk about problems or even other things, good things, because that concern was accepted. It felt safe. It was rewarded in some way. The second gift is one of appreciation. And I think the best way to explain this is to ask you to think back to when you were first dating your significant other, your husband or wife. And I imagine in those situations, you weren't really exactly sure where you stood in the relationship. There's some back and forth. You started opening up, but you weren't sure just how much the object of your affection really liked you in return. And try to remember how good it felt when you got that little confirmation. When you reached out and you put your arm around them, or you reached out for a hug and they responded, they reciprocated, and how good that felt. This is what I mean here, is that little gift of appreciation, that affirmation that things are going well. Similarly, when you're trying to rebuild trust, it's really important that you demonstrate and that you express your appreciation. So as they open up, that you tell them, I really appreciate you sharing that with me. Even if it's concerns, even if it's problems, you want to, if you're trying to build up trust and intimacy, you want to encourage that. And that's what it's all about, is encouraging and giving signals that it's okay for the other person to continue to be open. That appreciation is really key. I'm thinking to my wife and I, when we've sometimes had trouble and when we've had things that have been really difficult to share, what's made it easier for me to share with my wife is just those little moments when she does accept who I am and expresses that appreciation for being open. It goes a long way. The third gift that I want to discuss is this gift of intimacy or openness yourself. If you want to encourage openness, trust, and intimacy from the other person, then you should be willing to give that yourself. When things are rough, when things are tense, this can really charge the situation by being open and honest, but keeping in mind those other gifts as well. It's one thing to tell your partner how it is, to tell them the truth, to be blunt, that's one way of doing it. That's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about is, being honest with your feelings. If you do have some hurt, it's okay to tell your husband or wife that you are feeling hurt, but by being clear about what you mean. For example, you might say, it's been really difficult for me to talk about these things. I feel really guarded, and I feel hurt sometimes. I do want to talk about this. I do want to be close to you, but I just want you to know that this is difficult for me. And by splitting, by being very clear on what you mean, it leaves less room for misunderstandings, for the other person to feel that rejection. And by bringing those emotions out into the open, you yourself encourage them to do the same, which is exactly what builds up trust. So I would love to hear from you, those of you that are watching. What kind of questions do you have about trust, about building intimacy? Do you have any problems with this yourself? Do you have anything that's getting in the way of you yourself building that up or rebuilding it with your spouse? I know a lot of times there are big obstacles. There can be, past, the history, past abuse or past experiences that really tend to put up some walls and make someone really guarded. I know that can get in the way a lot. Or sometimes it is a little bit about communication. Let us know. I will be checking in on this a little bit later, and I do like to respond to these things, these threads as much as possible. So thank you for watching. I wish you all the best of luck with making your marriage a thriving marriage. We're always, as always, we're here to help and support you as much as we can. So once again, leave those questions. We'll get back to them. Thanks for watching. And I'm trying to end the video here.